people are going to go through that, just like what are the 5 stages of grieving, so to say, that when you put the glasses on, you're going to go through 5 stages of something, and that's natural. Like, people just have to do it. People have to suffer and be upset, and then that'll turn into something else. It'll transmute into, and eventually you'll get to love. And when you're finally like feeling love even for your enemy, that you're getting closer and closer to that, and with that comes controlling your emotions and your preconceived notions and your perspective, and having that compassion for the person that doesn't have the glasses on. You mentioned Fauci or whatever it is. These are all characters, and they only appeal to people that aren't wearing glasses. And you'll always have a friend with somebody, whether or not they're into the same subject matter, but if they can have the glasses for one thing, one subject, whether it's Fauci's or food or climate change, you have common ground. And that's the key, is just finding the common ground, and that you can't let anyone allow you to have a bad view of whatever process somebody's going through. They're just at a different stage in their
development.
They're at a different stage in their journey, and you were there.
All
of us are. Nobody wakes up with glasses on. Nobody. No. and often with a lot of people I've come across in doing these talks with people over time, is that the glasses kick on when you've gone through some traumatic event. Redheaded American giants with strange powers. 3,000-year-old records studied. Fighting red-headed Indian tribe denoted by 10,000 well-preserved specimens from Nevada mountain cave. But yeah, Alaska's a crazy, crazy place. And, from giant lizards to giant humans to huge cities frozen in time to gardens of Eden that existed inside of a frozen tundra. There are these places in Alaska that they found, more than just one, where the volcanic nature under the soil was so active that an entire tropical rainforest still existed in the middle of a snowy tundra, Alaska. But there's always carryover. For me, that is like big people, big giants, right? There's plenty of stories, not just from a skeletal record, but of living people. We'll get into some of those.
I found one that's 17 feet.
Yeah, I have them. We'll get into some here. I have some in California that are close to 50.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, this one in California that I have for the show is really mind-blowing. And I did a video on that California was an island, that it was a remnant of Lemuria. Whether or not people believe in Atlantis or Lemuria, you want to talk about a cult side, Atlantis was a fake, and that Atlantis is really North America, and that creating this mythical island in the middle of the Atlantic was just a ruse to get people off of what exists here in America. And that I have a lot of support for that, just based on my own material. I still like to dive into all these subjects with an open mind. That's one thing I've learned throughout this whole process, is to always have an open mind and know that history is, just like, all of the stories from the Bible and, the parables of these ancient religious texts, they're just life lessons, essentially. It's just kind of a guidebook to life, and that they all have really amazing gems for you to take with you. And, narrow is the path, and seek and you shall find. You have to go walk the path. And, as, Jesus or whomever that may be, the parable that's wrapped around that you're going to be made fun of and ridiculed. Once you put on the glasses and you see the world for what it is, you can't ever take them off. Yeah, they live. Yeah, of course. A perfect movie, perfect representation. And you can't put them on anybody. You can't make anybody see the world for what you see it, and that you'll be ridiculed. As soon as they go on, you're going to be an outcast. And how everyone navigates that is completely their own journey. I think this world, going back to my near-death experience, the number one thing I walk away from that is that ultimately this world, like dream state, is a journey, and you're here to learn and grow and make the best of it every day.
Analog, where can people subscribe to you, follow your work and all that? Twitter, YouTube, and everywhere else.
Yeah, so 1_analog_9 for all of my social media. I'm not on Facebook, never have been, but I've never really been a public social media person. I've avoided it my whole life, but once I started the YouTube channel, I just kind of threw that out the window. But yeah, that's my YouTube, my Twitter, and my Instagram. I'm active. I try to be on those every day, but depending on family needs, that varies. But yeah, the YouTube channel I just started like 4 months ago, 5 months ago. It's going pretty great, so I'm pretty happy with that. I've been posting stuff like this on Twitter for over a decade, and I'm relatively new to Instagram. But yeah,
your subscriber count's going up on YouTube, man.
Yeah, for just a few months. My goal was 12,000 subs by the beginning of 2024. So blowing that out of the water. So I'm pretty pumped on that. So it's been good for motivation, and I have I have endless material essentially. So not endless, but I could be doing this for a few more years and not worry about having to find quality stuff to talk about. So it's been nice. It's been quite a change. You don't you have such a different response on YouTube than you do on like Twitter. And Instagram's been great. They both showed me that Twitter is kind of a lacking social media for me, and I'm just kind of starting to morph all of my effort into YouTube.
Man, I tell you what, everybody that's watching this, you're going to be. It's definitely a breed of research that a lot of people just don't go down. I've looked on Library of Congress and looked at old articles before, but I never really fully committed like Analog has. And in the back of my mind, I was always thinking like, man, that'd be fun, but be doing podcasting and everything else like that. I was like, man, I just
It's
can't
a lot
commit.
of work.
It is. I can't commit to that. And I'm so glad that somebody finally committed to something like that, And everybody, I'm telling you, you're gonna be pumped about this. And this is gonna be one out of many podcasts down the road, because he has so much down material, it's not even funny. So I guess go ahead and just give a little background about you. Who is Analog? Like, how'd you become interested in old newspaper articles and just research in general?
Yeah. Somehow my 2-year-old's up here.
You might hear my 8.5-month-old.
So yeah, as long as you understand, we're good.
Well,
Hopefully my wife.
I think she's good now because I think she just ate, so the baby's good for a couple hours.
Yeah, the littlest one is my clone, and he's attached to dad. He's a daddy's boy, whereas my other two boys are not. So, but he's banging here, so I apologize for the audio. But yeah, my background.
I actually don't hear.
Perfect.
Hear
That's
your
why I try
kids.
to turn my mic sensitivity way down and sit real close, because there's always, house full of kids. It's always, even in this kind of studio, so to say, there's a lot of background noise. But yeah, so background, like I was telling you off air, I had a motorcycle accident in 2007. Had an out of body experience on top of all the other things I was going through. A lot of surgeries later, and a lot of therapy later. It's kind of one of those events where I was lucky to walk, let alone be alive. I had some brain damage and broke a lot of bones, but yeah, the out of body experience, I just couldn't shake it, and I had a lot of recovery time. And I've always kind of been an avid reader, but nothing really out of the norm, I would say. Nothing too fringe would probably be the better word. And so that process of exploring consciousness and near death experience and out of body experience, and that just, like things do, unraveled, and led me down this rabbit hole. Kind of, newspapers are just a medium. I've been doing the research thing, like I told you, for 15 plus years now. And, just started with me sharing my own personal library. And as things become digitized, it allows me to share interesting things, or things that I think are interesting, with, an audience kind of, and like I said, I've been doing Twitter for over 12 years. me posting. It started with just my own material on my own shelves, and then as the digitization of things becomes, more streamlined, and you can have access to so many things. That when archive.org first started, there was a tiny fraction of what there is now, and you could spend your whole rest of your life just on archive.org.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link to the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.
Let alone newspapers. But what led me down the newspaper rabbit hole, and some people may be familiar with the story, but for those that aren't, in middle school, we were doing this. My mother and my neighbors, we live on the street that separates us from our middle school, and we were cleaning up the street, and I found a pipe bomb. And so we called in the police. They brought the bomb squad. They blew up the bomb on the school. The whole neighborhood gathered around. How often do you see the bomb squad, SWAT, all the kinds of stuff. So the newspaper contacted us, wrote a little article about it. I was kind of like semi famous at school. They like did an announcement about it. And, fast forward 20 years, I was telling the story, and my mom didn't have the clipping any longer. So I ended up having to go look for it. And this is where I started with looking into digital archives. It was very analog at this time. Like they were half digital, half like the scopes, where you basically have to go in and physically look at copies they held on to the actual papers. Going farther back, they didn't have anything past like the 80s. And then through that, she's like, the lady that was helping me was like, oh, we're working on digitizing all of this, and you'll just be able to find it instantly. And so I kind of held on to that. And then, another few years down the road, I was just like, what if I just started thinking outside the box when it comes to interesting things in history? And I've combed through probably all 50 states doing I have a series on YouTube called Anomalous America. Years ago, I just was like, I'm going to go through every state and see what I can find. And I just kind of started amassing this collection, never with the idea of putting videos together for it, but just for my own amusement. And
you've already gone through all 50 states, because the last interview I heard you from, you was working on Louisiana.
Yeah, so I just finished Tennessee. Kentucky is going to be on Tuesday, so whenever this video ends up getting posted, if that's before or after, it's the 22nd of August will be my Kentucky episode, which is going to be one of my favorites. Missouri was one of my favorites. Louisiana, another one of my favorites. I'm just following the Mississippi up, just because there's so much information that blows people's mind, at least blew my mind, when it comes to like prehistoric cultures, especially along the Mississippi. But yeah, so I have material from years ago. Again, I didn't archive it, or I archived it, but I never organized it, right? Because I never had this medium, or was interested in this medium. And as I do these episodes, I have to go through my, over a terabyte of newspapers, which is crazy, Dang. And build each episode, which has been great, because now I have like this congruent, organized medium for people who are new to my material. They can just start at episode 1, Alaska, and work their way all the way to where I am now, soon to be Kentucky. And I just pick my favorites and talk for 2 hours or so. And it's been great. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah.
No, I'm here all the time, man. So I guess what, with all the research that you've done into this, have you, let's try to word this right. Okay, a lot of the things that you grab off the web is in digital form, like LOC and archive, and um. So do you save everything digitally, or also do you like print these things out so you can save them like a physical copy?
I mean, um I have drives. Everything so like it depends on what I'm doing. I'm fortunate enough that my day job I have a lot of time to read. So like I'll use my phone and I do screen grabs. I mean, it depends on what the material is and what I intend to do with it. Now that I actually am doing YouTube, my method has changed a little bit. Previously, I would just save PDFs, so I literally have, I don't even know, probably 10,000 PDFs, and yeah, those are all like hard copied, not in physical form, digital form on hard drives. But I've never printed anything out. No.
I guess whenever I first came across your material, in the back of my mind, I envisioned like this room with like the gliding ladder, across
Yeah.
like library shelves and stuff,
Oh yeah.
like storing all
Yeah.
these old archives.
Yeah.
Like
No, I wish.
it'd be pretty sweet, huh?
It would just take too much time. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of digital.
Yep. Trust me, I get it, man.
Yeah, and the keyword search, I've throughout my Anomalous series, I've paid for a 30-day subscription to just about every state, minus a few, because the congressional archive does vary from the state archive. And the congressional archives are a little archaic. If you try to use anything over 2 words or 3 words, it becomes useless essentially. And these state archives have gotten pretty good, especially the college ones. So um, just through a quick little research, I can see who has the best archive, at least by quantity. And then I just go and look at them and see what their search parameters are. And like, I'll just use my state for example, like University of Oregon. You can type in a whole sentence, so you can really narrow whatever it is you're looking for,
Wow.
and you can shrink and grow your parameters based on how far away words are from each other. So like again, it's just like anything, like muscle memory, like tuning a muscle. I
Hmm.
just got it down to a science essentially now. And yeah, so when I do an episode, I'll find whatever archive I think has the best potential. I'll do a quick little subscription. Not all of them are subscription based, some are free. And then I'll just go in there and it's about 50% state based and 50% federal based, you know. And Library of Congress is great for a beginner, but when you start to go deep like me, you'd be surprised how you can search the exact same search a year later and not find the same material. Whether or not the coding changes or the quantity of things change, there's just so many things that change. I've seen that the way the algorithm works has changed. Whether or not I don't think necessarily it's malicious, it's just poor coding. And as the amount of material keeps, I mean, the digitization of stuff is insane now. It's when I first started using the congressional stuff, it was like a million. I think now they're over 20 million
Damn.
newspapers. So it just goes to show you how much material there is out there.
And it just shows me and everybody else that you mean serious effing business, because man, I thought LOC and like maybe archive, that was it. I didn't know there was subscription stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I did
Yep. I
not
mean,
know
whatever
that,
state
man.
you're in, you can find the newspaper that goes back the longest. That varies every state. So whatever state you're in, the county you're in, you just got to do a little research and see who has the deepest archive, so to say.
LOC is
Because
kind of a pain in the ass to search.
it is, yeah, yeah,
At least
yeah.
what the ones that I've done. I haven't spent as much time
I
as you, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like LOC, and I pretty much only use that when I'm at work, and the reason being is that its software is the most phone friendly, whereas a lot of these state and college archives are not phone friendly, meaning the coding's not good, and it's just like really clunky and searching on a phone that's what I would suggest. Library of Congress is probably just good for that. Other than that, you really got to do your homework and go look for the more specific local collection of papers. And I learned that the most, especially with these older states. The closer I get to the Mississippi and moving east, that's where it's going to pay dividends, because the newspapers go farther and farther and farther back the farther east you go. Whereas, California, they don't even, the papers, they start in the 1840s at the earliest, the gold rush, quote unquote, the repopulating of the West. Whereas you can go all the way to the 1700s on the East Coast.
What would you say before we're about to start going and getting to some of your articles, but first, if you had a name in states off the top of your head, the top 5 for the most crazy material, occult, paranormal, ancient mysteries, whatever it is, like what would you say is probably your top 5?
Alaska.
Really?
Which always blows people's minds.
Yeah. Would you say that's number 1
Alaska
or that
might
number 5?
even be number 1. Alaska's crazy. Yeah. And Alaska, because again, it's the further west you go, the closer to our timeline the archive starts, because history as we know it starts at a different time frame versus east of the Mississippi. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to rank off the top of my head. I love Alaska just because there's so much depth there. I thought when I started this, I was like, I'm going to kind of struggle, I think, with Alaska. And it was like, I didn't even touch a 10th of my material for Alaska. And I think by the time I'm done with this whole series, I'll end up going back through and doing like part 2s for a lot of states. So Alaska, California, Arizona. Man, this is tough. 5 isn't even, I don't even know.
Just off the top of your head.
Missouri. If I have to pick, I love them all. To be totally honest, I think anyone could watch any of those series. I stick to kind of a similar material. I don't do too much paranormal stuff just because the way it was written about was quite different, the verbiage and everything. And I just have to stumble upon stuff like that to find it. I can't really search. The language is quite different for paranormal stuff than it is today. Like UFO, all those terminologies we use today, they didn't exist 100 years ago. Yeah, so Alaska, California, Missouri, Arizona, and Colorado. I love them all, to be honest, but those would be my top. And
I had to put you on the
caught me
spot.
off.
I had to put you on the spot because you talk about so much stuff, and I know you've done a lot of work and research into these states, and so I was like, let me see which one is his favorite. And you kind of blew my mind with Alaska, man, because don't get me wrong,
a lot of people.
Well, because you wouldn't think that the population that we know of throughout time has been low, that we know of.
Yeah.
So not enough printing presses, not enough news material, not enough all of that. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
think of it like this. Less than 200 years ago, that's my estimate. It could be a little bit more. Alaska was completely covered in a population exceeding probably 200 million, maybe more. And it was covered, the whole state was pretty much covered. And it was a tropical environment. So this ice age and the current polar temperature changes that we know of today didn't exist just a few hundred years ago.
And I just interviewed Archaics a couple months ago. Do you think that's, I don't know.
Well, you picked the perfect time to bring him up. He actually reposted one of my videos just recently, oddly enough, and it was talking about Alaska is the biggest marker for a vapor canopy type of event, and that gold that was stored in the atmosphere or in this vaporous canopy was most dense on the outer extremities of the flat plane or the polar extremes of a globe, whatever your concept of Earth may be. That's fine, but around the outer part, the poles or the outer part of the ring, more gold was deposited when this vapor canopy fell, and that authors were writing on this in the 1800s to quite an extent. I've posted quite a few books about this. One of the first new-ish secret societies founded in America was founded by the first people that explored Alaska after the reset. They were called the Arctic Brotherhood, and they branch into all kinds of really crazy stuff. They're responsible for the creation of Social Security platform as we know it, the identification card, um, cinema. All the men that the founding brothers of this, they were all Masons. They started all the movie theaters. And it started in Washington, believe it or not, and spread predominantly on the West Coast, but then slowly to the East Coast. But yeah, Alaska is a crazy, crazy place. And, from giant lizards to giant humans to huge cities frozen in time to gardens of Eden that existed inside of a frozen tundra. There are these places in Alaska that they found more than just one where the volcanic nature under the soil was so active that an entire tropical rainforest still existed in the middle of a snowy tundra, Alaska. The things they were finding there were unbelievable. And but yeah, the amount of gold they found there and are still finding there.
It kind of rings a go ahead.
The mammoths, all these bones that were deposited. My video that he reposted was the deluge, the fall of the last vapor canopy, or the last deluge, the fall of the vapor canopy. And there's been a lot of people that have written about these river systems, these riverbeds they find all over Alaska, where thousands of animals were just pushed. Their bones were just pushed into these riverbeds, where you can obviously see that a flood swept through this area. And, over time, I posted a ton on man walked with beast. We weren't separated by millions of years, and that dinosaurs are, Greek for terrible lizard. They were just big lizards. And that, just like a large tropical environment, everything was bigger. The trees were bigger. The foliage was bigger. Humans were bigger. Animals were bigger.
Do you think we're closer to the sun, though, during that time?
Well, I don't know. Again, this is all conjecture, but based on the vapor canopy, and many ancient cultures talk about a time when the sun and the moon were birthed, that they didn't even see them. So this strengthens the idea that there was a vaporous canopy that covered the stars and the heavens and all of these things. And that whenever this fell, an event of some kind, that's the deluge of the Bible. And there have been many floods. A lot of my articles show this, that there's been many, many different events stacked on top of each other. And that as I, go through this material, I show that, they find a city under a city and then another city. And the American Southwest shows this strongest California, starting in California, although in Oregon we have it, in Washington we have it, and in Alaska. So this flood covered at least the northern hemisphere. There's evidence to show it covered all parts of the world, but because I stick predominantly to displaying newspapers and my series is based around America, that's where I would say my evidence is the most strongly supported for an event. And the archaic stuff overlaps with my work really nicely. And even if it's not talking about a vaporous canopy, I talk about the deluge all the time. And the deluge and many other events show a culmination point, and then a society or a culture as we know it is wiped.
Plasma events, mud floods,
all kinds, several. And as we get further into this, we'll talk about, the Aztec lore is that there were 4 events, all different, mud, water, fire, all different elements, earth, fire, wind, water. So they say we're the 5th age, and all the previous ages were destroyed by a different element. And a lot of my articles support that. It's very interesting.
Okay, we're about to get into that, but I didn't want to interrupt you a while ago. You're talking about the gold. You're talking about the gold.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe there's some bits and pieces of truth within Zechariah Sitchin's research and about the Nibiru and the Anunnaki needing gold for their atmosphere.
Sure.
Maybe there's bits and pieces. If there's truth in all that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I don't know. But anyways, what do you want to show us first?
Well,
just take us down whatever road you want to take us down, man.
Sure. Um, what did I can't even remember what I had selected first. Okay, there we go. So meant to be. We were talking about Alaska, so we'll talk about some of the interesting creatures that were still alive. A lot of things survived. There's carryover of animals and humans between these events, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever carries over is eradicated. Whether or not this is a planned thing, and that you could postulate, you could go forever and really take this whatever direction you want to, but there's always carryover. For me, that is like big people, big giants, right? There's plenty of stories, not just from a skeletal record, but of living people. We'll get into some of those, as
I
well
found one
as
that's 17 feet.
yeah, I have them. We'll get into some here. I have some in California that are close to 50.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, this one in California that I have for the show is really mind blowing. And I did a video on that California was an island, that it was a remnant of Lemuria. Whether or not people believe in Atlantis or Lemuria, from you want to talk about a cult side, Atlantis was a fake, and that Atlantis is really North America, and that um, creating this mythical island in the middle of the Atlantic was just a ruse to get people off of what exists here in America. And that I have a lot of support for that just based on my own material. I still like to dive into all these subjects with an open mind. That's one thing I've learned throughout this whole process, is to always have an open mind and know that history is, just like, all of the stories from the Bible and, the parables of these ancient religious texts, they're just life lessons. Essentially, it's just kind of a guidebook to life, and that they all have really amazing gems for you to take with you. And narrow is the path, and seek and you shall find. You have to go walk the path, and as Jesus or whomever that may be, the parable that's wrapped around that you're going to be made fun of and ridiculed. Once you put on the glasses and you see the world for what it is, you can't ever take them off. Yeah, they live. Yeah, of course. A perfect movie, perfect representation. And you can't put them on anybody. You can't make anybody see the world for what you see it, and that you'll be ridiculed. As soon as they go on, you're going to be an outcast. And how everyone navigates that is completely their own journey. I think this world, going back to my near-death experience, the number one thing I walk away from that is that ultimately this world, like dream state, is a journey, and you're here to learn and grow and make the best of it every day.
Exactly.
And instill these kind of ideas and freedom of mind in your children. And yeah, think of it as kind of a simulation of sorts. I like to think of it like that it is a bit like, the Matrix that's on your wall too, and that
Yep. Dark City too. Don't forget Dark City now. It's kind of like a simulation, I guess.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
In a way.
And that it's up to you, and that everything's in your mind, everything's mind. And this whole world is, Maya. Illusory.
Yeah.
It's an illusory world that it's created in your head, and that you can manipulate it, kind of like the bending of the spoon in Matrix, with your mind. You can manipulate reality with how you think. And
well, for everybody listening, this is his first time, and this won't be his last. We won't have this long of an opening next time, but
we can just jump right into
because
material.
A lot of people, he's still getting his name out there. And first off, man, your research is game changer, like for real. Like we need you to keep on pushing forward, and we need more people that, if they can find the time, trust me, I get it. It's hard enough just doing a podcast, 2 episodes a week. But if we need more people,
I record all of my YouTube videos during nap time.
That's the dedication, man.
You just got to do it. Yeah. And
that's the dedication.
With 3 little kids, like I said, and you already know you're in it 8 months.
It's tough,
man. I've done it 3 times.
With tough.
One, you feel like, how can I do anything? And then you add another on top of it.
I don't do this full time either. I actually have a real, but I like my job.
Yeah, me too.
Because I get to listen to headphones. I say this all the time, so some people probably get tired of it. I love my slave job. I love it
Yeah.
because I get to listen to headphones. That's my like yours.
Yeah.
That's my hearing protection. The ones you have on, that's my
Yeah.
hearing protection.
I
So
get to listen to whatever I want at work too.
yeah,
Same.
podcast interviews, Audible books,
Yep.
dude.
Yep.
So
Yep.
go
I mean, a lot of my absorption of material comes from the fact that I'm grateful I get paid to do a job. I do it well, but I also have, it's a bit muscle memory, so to say. I can do it without quite being so conscious. So I'm free to absorb a lot of material and audiobooks and podcasts and all of those things. It's a blessing having mental faculties while doing some kind of work. With
Mhm.
kids and stuff, I can't read at home. So all my research is at work for the most part. There are some exceptions there. And the material I put forth is done, during nap time. So yeah, like that's like you said, you just have to find time and make the best of it you can.
You got to, man. So go ahead and take us down the road to Alaska.
Yeah, so you can see my screen, right?
Uh,
I think you may have turned it on, or I didn't click it.
share screen.
Okay, here we go.
Boom. Something's working here.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm gonna move my little video.
All
So
right.
now
Everything's visible.
okay. All right. So yeah, since we were talking about Alaska and you asked me about it, this was just the first one I had pulled up. And this is called Prehistoric Beast Seen, Alaska, 1928. Giant saurian of Arctic emerges. Siberians report terrible monster believed to live in the newly discovered Chursky Range. That's a mountain range in Russia. Gigantic prehistoric creature that once hunted over Alaska, now exciting Russian savants.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll just read highlights for
what
the
year
sake
was
of
that?
time.
What year was that?
This is published in 1928, but I believe it occurred mostly in like 1924, 1926. Yeah, 1926. So I'll just read the highlights just for the sake of time because a lot of these articles are quite long, as you can see. Here's an image of it. This was posted a few years later.
Damn.
This is what the animal looks like. It's a hairy lizard, and it's carrying an adult caribou in its mouth.
So this was actually in the old.
Newspaper.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah. So just to give you an idea of size, for anybody that is familiar with how large an adult caribou is, it's not small, and you can see it's carrying it in its mouth. So yeah, I'll just read the highlighted parts. Like I said, as big as 10 elephants, it passed like a hurricane across the frozen river, smashing immense blocks of thick ice into the air. Its long bristles were covered with coarse frost, and its immense red eyes flamed in the twilight. The monster held in its mouth a caribou of close to 700 pounds, while it careened at 20 miles per hour. Gigantic prehistoric creature that is now again exciting Russian sportsmen and scientists, along with the discovery of an unsuspected mountain range in northeastern Siberia, which may be its home. So they postulate that this thing's living in a huge subterranean cave system, and then it hibernates and comes out, and that this would be part of the reason why, as I suggested to you earlier, it survives these changeover type events where these prehistoric giant creatures from a previous age make it into the next age. They go underground. And
If
that's
I
what
can interject real quick, maybe
please.
you're talking about underground, maybe there's and I'll try to make a lot of these comments quick and short because I know you got a lot of material. The Los Angeles Times or something like that from like the 1920s or 30s of reptiles or whatever underneath the ground, underneath the city.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe there's a connection there, man. Because
I have a ton of subterranean
that article
stuff.
is back from like the 20s or 30s also, back in the day.
Yeah, and I've actually seen that article and I didn't post it. I have my own concerns with that. Just because I don't think there's anyone that's looked through in more papers than me.
Yeah.
Really, I think I can strongly say that. And I've never seen anything like that. Like the reptilian thing. I see giant lizards all the time.
Well,
but
I guess what I should have said.
Humanoid serpents. I have a few, like a woman who was serpent bodied, but she had a human head and could speak. but never anything quite like that. My subterranean stuff, we'll get into my favorite article. It's one that I talked about on the higher side chats. And it's mind blowing. And I think it's more realistic than the kind of lizardy
Well,
humanoid stuff.
maybe there's a like what I think is like with that one you just read with the drawing and all that. Maybe they're just getting misinterpreted,
Yeah,
through mistranslated through time or whatever. And
yeah, because they had all kinds of crazy reptiles living in these cave systems that were a part of this kind of changeover. These things that survived these events,
and if they survived over time like that, maybe they did get some type of more advanced knowledge. I'm not saying conscious beings like us. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that, but if they could survive this long, maybe they evolved like
Oh yeah,
mentally.
yeah. I mean, these things that make it through whatever these events are, um, they're not dumb.
Maybe on a
And
dolphin level, maybe.
this goes back to kind of, I've made this reference a million times, but Edgar Casey talked a lot about what Atlantis was like, and that the quote Atlantean culture, they weren't necessarily warring with each other. They were all occupied against giant animals, and that's who they were warring with. And the destruction of Atlantis was part of an attack against these giant sea monsters that were attacking their ships and their people. And they would bait these creatures to the bottom of the ocean, and they'd blow up these giant gas wells. And that's how they would kill them. And that they blew up one and it caused a chain reaction.
Damn.
And I did a video about Lemuria showing these gas well chains and how they go all along the equator across the realm. And that they also attribute that this event could have been what sunk Lemuria. And I've crossed all of the islands of the Pacific. And let me tell you, the ones sticking up out of the water are covered with stuff they can't explain. I mean, stuff like, straight out of pyramids like Egypt, but even more crazy. All over, all of the islands in the Pacific, not all, but most, have insanely cyclopean construction on them. And I'd say even stronger than anything found in the Atlantic, support the idea of a big island or something along those lines. The water level for sure was lower. We know this for a fact, especially in the Gulf. There are cities all along the Gulf, all the way from the Yucatan to Florida. There are bodies and burials found 100 to a quarter mile off the ocean, in the coast there. So, and this is all over, Japan, Alaska, it's everywhere. You just go 100 feet off the coast, 200, depends how deep the drop off is, of course, but 200 to 300 feet sea level rise is proven. And there's a historical record in the relics and the kind of advanced ancient constructions they find in California supports this very strongly too. I mean, the islands off Southern California are covered in all kinds of crazy stuff, especially just below the surface of the water. They found 26 pyramids off the coast of the Alaskan coast, 21 or 26.
I knew it was a lot. I wasn't sure exactly how many, but I knew it was a lot though.
Yeah, 21 at least that are, and the tallest one was 600 feet. So huge.
Damn. But I'm going to try to quit interjecting because I know you got a lot of material. Well, like I said, this
is the problem with any interview is we could pick one newspaper article, and since me and you have kind of just met and got to know each other, we're going to be covering a lot of ground, and these articles are so long you could correlate them with so many other ideas like you're doing with the subterranean stuff. And
it's definitely going to be multiple interviews because like I'm going to try to just let you just do your thing, and I may interject every now and then, but just go and just try to, some of them, just you can either explain more or just go through some of them quickly, whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
man.
like I said, some of these older ones I just highlight my favorite parts, but I've kind of stopped doing that. It takes a lot of time when you think about finding these articles, cutting them up, highlighting them, and posting them. And now that I have a different medium, which is YouTube, I just go about it differently, and I just read off of PDFs because it's a lot easier for me than using Twitter, which originally has been nice because it's provided me with a pretty awesome, easy to access archive, but it's not user friendly and most people don't have it. So YouTube, everyone can access, Not to mention my time is, incredibly valuable, and
Yeah.
there's there's some reward there for me and my family. So it's a win-win. But yeah, like I said, I'm just going to highlight a few of these and we'll just knock a few out. You jump in anytime.
Okay.
So yes, exciting. This was probably the last great mountain range remaining to be discovered on the globe. So, I mean, Siberia hides a lot, just like Alaska. I postulated so much about Siberia that it has to be just like Alaska. You can go back into, and I've done a pretty extensive job of this. You can go back into a Siberian folklore or culture history, and in the early 1800s, there were dark-skinned people with camels living in Siberia. So to think that this ice age happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, or tens of 10,000 years ago, is ridiculous. And there's so much evidence, not to mention, again, just my Alaska episode, you could correlate all the way Siberia, I would say, looks just like Alaska, covered in cities that are frozen under the ice. I'm going to just keep bouncing around here. To kill it, even high explosive shells would be necessary. The Duke of Westminster certainly believed in the Patridge Creek monster. So that's an important correlation, because throughout my YouTube videos, I go into these kind of elite royal families. They loved, and why I correlate that they may have some understanding of these changeover events, because what they do is they spend most of their time traveling the world killing these things. Like, Roosevelt's a perfect example. He traveled the world. He was a big game hunter. But I mean, we're talking game like you couldn't imagine, like prehistoric monster big game, I don't know if you've ever seen some of those images, but he had quite an interesting opinion about what the world was like. I mean, he was like, these things are from a previous age. He of course had to nod his hat and say, like ancient dinosaurs or some nonsense like that. But the Duke of Westminster and a lot of these dukes, princes, you name it, they were traveling the world big game hunting, looking for these animals. And I have a video on my YouTube channel about the Smithsonian putting up a $5 million bounty in the early 1920s, like 1919. So imagine what $5 million was in 1919. And they were attracting the biggest big game hunters from around the world to go kill a dinosaur. They called it a big lizard in the Congo.
That's probably $100 million a day.
Yeah. So the Smithsonian was putting up bounties, and a lot of my articles strongly support this, that people, and even in these small towns, they were like, hey, you want to offer me $500 for this crazy skeleton I found? Well, I know the Smithsonian will pay me 10 times as much. So it would either get hushed, or you had people that were ballsy enough who would go, I'm just going to open this up to the public and charge per head, and I'll probably make more money than they'd pay me. And that lasts for a month or two until the Smithsonian gets there and shuts them down,
Oh, yeah.
And that happens tons. The Smithsonian either bought you out or they forced you closed. And they were, they had free reign. Another one of my favorite articles is the governor of Colorado was pleading for federal protection for his ancient sites, because the Smithsonian was just coming in there and stealing everything. Not only were they stealing everything, he couldn't even arrest them, and that they were tearing the buildings down. So they were stealing mummies. That's verbatim. Stealing mummies and shipping them to the East. I've postulated for a long time, especially if you look into a lot of the weird construction going on in Egypt in the early 1910s and 20s, where they're literally building these ancient sites that tourists go to and visit. They're literally building them. There's tons of photos out there. People have done a lot of videos on this. All of the mummies that populate these Eastern museums, especially in Europe, are mummies from America, not mummies from Egypt. And that the oldest mummies are from America, Mexico, South America. So that's kind of off topic there. But yeah. So the Duke of Westminster, big correlation there. So people may question this, but you can find plenty of other evidence out there about the Duke of Westminster and his love of hunting big game. And he was hunting giant buffalo that were 10 foot at the shoulder. And he made several trips to Africa. He was hunting quote polar bears, but they called them cave bears, 15 feet tall bears in Siberia. On and on. So the Ceratosaurus in his range and photographed him when he kicked the avalanche in the rock close to this. That was that picture that you saw earlier. They redrew a photograph. The photographs they didn't translate into print, so they would redraw pictures. The monster was seen again with a caribou in its mouth. I showed that already. And then it basically, just for the sake of time, it goes on to describe that they disappeared into a cave. And this same creature was seen across the Aleutian chain in Russia. So they hypothesized that this thing crosses the ice and that it hibernates for up to 5 years at a time. So it stuffs itself and then it goes to sleep in a cave somewhere. And I think I touch on it a little bit farther down. I don't.
Some of those
There's an
bears,
author.
some of those bears you was talking about, like
Yeah.
those enormous. Maybe that's what. Maybe I'm just saying. Maybe that's what some of us call as Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti today. Possibly.
Yeah. I don't have. There's a lot of hairy men that live in the woods or live. Most of them live in caves, and I would say if Sasquatch exists today, he lives in caves. And one of my best articles is from. I actually don't have it pulled up, unfortunately, but I could just overview it. Maybe next time we do this,
Yeah.
I'll have more material on that ready. But yeah, some of the best spottings of this kind of that correlate as nicely as possible to to Bigfoot today were found in Texas, and they called him a giant orangutan. He had red hair, but he stood erect. He wasn't hunched over like an orangutan, and he had a human face, and he walked with a staff, so very humanoid, and made very crazy sounds, and that he was caught or seen carrying whole deer off just under his arms. So you can imagine they estimated his height to be around 8 feet, 9 feet.
Some of the giants in the Southwest were known to have red hair too, right?
Oh yeah, and I have a good one pulled up for you, and I have tons. I have tons and tons of the oldest red-haired mummies ever found are from North America. The first and oldest, again, timelines. I don't stick too much of my weight on these timeline estimations because they're completely erroneous for the most part. But I have another one pulled up here. Hopefully, we get to it from New Mexico, and they call it the oldest redheaded mummy in the world. And he was found 3 civilizations below ground. So they had, quote, I can't remember if it was Apache. We'll find the article. But then there was an older age before the Apache, and they say their forefathers knew of the ruins and they just built their homes on top of them. And then this guy was found below that.
How many years
Correlating.
is 3 civilizations? 3 generations or 3
No.
civilizations?
3 different civilizations, probably hundreds of generations
What
that were
the
buried
hell,
by an
man?
event, and then another 3, 5, 10 generations builds another city on top of that.
Holy shit.
And then I've, through all of my episodes, shown at least one major city in whatever state you live in is built on top of the ruins of an ancient civilization, and they know
Damn.
about it. Yeah. Kentucky is going to be amazing. Just about every city in Kentucky is built on a subterranean ancient city or subterranean system of some kind. New Mexico, I got a really good one that I say the origin of deep underground bases is ancient, and these underground cities are ancient, and that the government just took them over and repopulated them, and that the ancients knew about these changeover events, and that many of them lived underground for this very reason.
Man, you're giving me goosebumps, man. Keep on, man.
Yeah. So, let's keep going with the giant stuff. This one is hunting a live prehistoric monster from Mississippi, 1910. One of the most remarkable scientific discoveries ever made. In the wilds of New Guinea, a marvelous race of pygmies, a monster mammal larger than an elephant named the Gazika, wrought havoc against the pygmies. Here's the article. You see how big this is. This is a pygmy. These people, here's a footprint of the creature.
Damn.
Next to the pygmies. The tallest was like 4 feet, but the average was like 3.5 feet. So to give you an idea of how big this thing is, right? Here's the British. They're hunting this thing, big game hunters again, and the pygmy in the arms. This thing, when they first come upon it, it's attacking a village and carrying the pygmies off. Here's another, like, just to show you, they don't kill the creature, but the pygmies were able to show that they had some bones of these creatures. Look how big this is,
Holy shit.
So this thing's massive, and like you just get a good idea of it. These are the kind of creatures that survive these events.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.